welcome. It's great to see everyone joining us this evening. My name is Oyen. I am the Community Supports Manager at POV, and we're so happy to have you joining us for our first process series. As mentioned, POV is presenting this evening, and we are a nonprofit organization whose aim is to increase access to the TV and film production sector for diverse creatives from communities that are underrepresented in the industry. So this includes youth who identify as BIPOC, LGBTQ+, and of course, as well, if you're a newcomer. We do this work by implementing industry-led training and mentorship while connecting youth with fresh perspectives to internships, job placements, and professional development opportunities amongst our network of partnerships. And one of those partners is the DGC. Hi, David.
Hi, Oyen. How are you? Welcome, everybody. My name is David Seymour. I'm the Manager of Member Services at the Directors Guild of Canada Ontario District Council. For some of you who may not know, the DGC is a nationwide labor organization. Across the country, we represent about 5,000 people. Here in Ontario, of that 5,000, we have about 3,000 members, and we represent the job categories that we refer to as the key creative and key logistical personnel in the film and television industry. So, of course, directors, as our name says, but along with the directors, we also represent art department personnel, the editing departments, production management, assistant directors, accounting, and locations. And I'm always happy with myself when I remember all 7 departments. I think everyone is kind of slowly settling in. So what I'd like to do now, Oyen, is begin with a land acknowledgement.
Sure.
So I would like to acknowledge that we're broadcasting from the traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat, and later the treaty territory of the Mississauga of the Credit River. We acknowledge the treated and untreated land that all of us are inhabiting. Toronto and the rest of Ontario is still home to many Indigenous people, and we are very glad for the opportunity to live and work on this land. So with that in mind, I'd just like to, on behalf of the Directors Guild of Canada, welcome everyone to today's inaugural event. This is a new series called The Process.
Right.
About a year ago, in partnership with the City of Toronto, DGC Ontario began a collaboration with POV on a pilot PA program. We're very happy to announce that we're undertaking that initiative again this year. And so along with that PA program, even more delighted to continue to further expand our collaboration with POV and all of the team there through this monthly series.
Yeah, and so this evening in particular is actually the first of that process series, and we'll be touching on portraying social issue-driven stories on screen with depth and authenticity. So, of course, it's my pleasure to introduce Sunita Miya-Muganza, who is the moderator this evening and also happens to be an alumnus of our media training program. Hey, Sunita. She is a Tanzanian Canadian director and writer whose debut film, Badassery, is a compelling expose about female DJs who are unapologetically disrupting the Toronto hip-hop scene. She's gone on to produce and direct several independent projects. Her contribution as the production manager, associate producer to the 2019 CBC doc series Devout and Out earned her first Banff International Rookie Award nomination. She's also recently been selected to be a part of the Real World Film Festival E20 program. So please go ahead, Sunita.
Well, thank you.
Great time, everybody.
Hi. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to, it's TIFF. So happy TIFF to everyone. I know that 2020 TIFF is a little bit different, but we're managing. I don't want to go too much, say too much. I wanted to introduce our directors for today. I'm a fan. I watched all their work and watched every interview possible I can find. And so without further ado, I'm going to introduce Tiffany Hsiung. Tiffany is an award-winning filmmaker based in Toronto. Her approach to storytelling is driven by a relationship that she builds with people, She recently received the prestigious Peabody Award for her debut feature documentary, The Apology, along with the DuPont Columbian Award and the Alan King Memorial Award. After an astounding world premiere at Hot Dogs International Film Festival, The Apology, that was released in 2016, went on to receive 15 international awards and has screened over 120 film festival that includes the United States of America, Korea, and different Chinese distribution. And you can also see this film at PBS. Tiffany, welcome. I am a huge, huge fan. Where are you, first of all?
In my kitchen. I'm in Toronto. I am in our lovely city.
Oh, fantastic. So I'm going to invite Kelly to the conversation, and then we're going to get into, into trouble a little bit. So Kelly Marshall is a dedicated director, screenwriter, and social activist. Kelly has directed several body of work, include music videos, documentary, narratives, and branded content. Her vast experience has also been has allowed her to be invited to the jury for the Canadian Academy of Film and Television, as well as several film festivals. Her brilliant work, Heaven, that was released in 2018, has premiered at the South by Southwest Film Festival, as well as winning the Audience Choice Award in a room full of her peers at BAFTA. Her recent film, Black Bodies, premiered this year at TIFF, and is now nominated for the Best Canadian Short Film. Kelly, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you, thank you.
First of all, this is our first time meeting, but we've been buddies on social media. So I've been creeping your profile for a very long time. So I'm glad you're here. And so I wanted to start this conversation, or want to frame this conversation solely on your work and your process, as this, series is titled after. So if Tiffany, can you start with telling us about your film, Sing Me a Lullaby, what it is, and what's your intention for it?
Well, Sing Me a Lullaby, it started back in 2005, and it's so interesting. I think it's so great that I could be part of this inaugural event, and how appropriate the process, because Sing Me a Lullaby was all about the process. I was 21, and it all started out with being incredibly ambitious and overly confident with myself, thinking that I would be able to locate and find my mother's biological parents after growing up and realizing that my mother had no idea what had happened to her in her past. And I thought she had never wanted to talk about it, but it's in fact she just didn't know. And so that really propelled me on this journey to go and look for them, as well as process while looking for them, as well as finding out, and as the process went along, and developing also relationships with people along the way, and having my mom part of the process. Like, it never ends. And even though we might be done a film and completing a story, especially a documentary, life continues. So despite, after releasing the film, yesterday we had our world premiere, I still feel like we're still growing with this story. And I'm just so fortunate that the life of this film continues to grow now with other people. But the catalyst started when I found out that my mom didn't know, actually, in fact, what happened to her. And I felt like she deserved to know. I believe we all deserve to have a choice to know our past. And that's what it all started with. However, documenting then, when I was 21, I wasn't thinking anything further than needing to have evidence to my mother and family members that I was actually going to go on this trip. I think everyone thought I was just going to go to Taiwan and just mess around with my friends. So I needed evidence to show as well that I was actually going to go and do this, because no one really believed me when I said that I wanted to do this. But it's interesting when we talk about process. At a certain point in making this film, I had actually thought that I had done something wrong. that I had stirred the pot, that opened up this Pandora box that shouldn't have been opened. And that brought me into a place of like really trying to understand what this was all about. I think it's really different when you're filming other people and other subject matters, but when you have the camera also on yourself and on your family members, the typical things that are so difficult to face, we would often just look away. And by directing this, you're kind of forced to look at the difficult stuff. In fact, also delve very deep into it, which is an uncomfortable thing, I think, for anyone to have to just like analyze, look at the nuances of yourself as well as your mother. And it took me 10 years to look at the footage that I shot for Sing Me a Lullaby. It took me over 10 years to I kept on shooting, but I just never looked at it. And it was around 2008 footage that I saw myself. So part of my process is to do a lot of video journals after shoots, to have a record of what I just did and to have a documentation of that. And I found this video journal I did in 2008 in Taiwan, and I'm talking to my future self. And it was so bizarre. I was like, Tiffany, if you're watching this right now, I want you to remember this, no matter how difficult things are, no matter how challenging things are, just remember your intentions. Don't ever forget, and keep going. As long as your intentions are pure, keep going. Don't be scared. My younger self was telling my future self what to do. And so instead of being so scared of looking at this footage and being angry at my 21-year-old younger self because I couldn't stand my outfits or my personality, I actually embraced her and was thinking about how certain things we can't knock in terms of how young and immature we are. Sometimes we have to go through the process of also growing to get to where we are today, to appreciate who we are today. We had to have been that young, rambunctious, rebellious young self, because I don't think I could have done what 21-year-old Tiffany did. And so by understanding that and appreciating that every step of our process, the mistakes, the failures, they're all part of that lessons to getting to where we are today. So once I realized that in my own life journey, I was able to really get to understanding the film that I needed to tell and really to finish and make this movie.
And Kelly, 2020 was a year where people discovered Black people, which was a very fascinating experience for all of us. Mm-hmm. And your film is very appropriate. Your film embodies, particularly the marathon, because I sat there and I watched the marathon first. I was like, oh my! And then I watched Black Bodies, and I was like, these are very parallel. The themes are very, very similar. Can you tell us a little bit about the work and your process as well?
Yeah. So both Marathon and Black Bodies, I filmed them as one, and then we ended up splitting it up this year. And so the process was in 2018, I actually was a part of an incident, a viral racial incident, where me and some peers and 3 peers were in California. We're leaving a rental property, and a white lady saw us and she called the police saying that we were breaking and entering. From that 911 call, we were then surrounded by 7 police cars and a helicopter, and we were detained. And so I filmed the whole incident. This was while the Living While Black, this is right after the Starbucks incident had happened. And so we filmed the whole incident. I put it online on my Instagram and my Facebook, and then it went viral. And then so after it went viral, I had flown back to Toronto that day, but then had to fly back out for an event that I was producing. And then we had to do a media tour. So I had to fly into the States and do a media tour. And we were on every channel from CNN to HLN, BBC, we were in Teen Vogue, literally every media outlet we were in, and just speaking about what it's like to be Black during this time. And so after I had done that media tour, I returned back to Toronto and realized that I had a lot of trauma from this situation. I had PTSD from this situation. I was super depressed from this situation. And it wasn't until one day I was taking my suitcases out of my car and felt like I was being watched that I realized that I hadn't really processed what was happening. And so I turned to art, I turned to film. That was my way to process it. And so I used Black Bodies and Marathon as a way to process that trauma. And so I thought about all the emotions I was feeling, all the things I wanted people that weren't Black to understand about what it's like to live in this skin. And then I just channeled that into the two films. So we did both Marathon and Black Bodies as a two-part. And then in February of this year, Ahmaud Arbery was murdered. And so Marathon just really spoke to why he was murdered and how he was murdered while running. And the team decided that it would be a great time to put it online. And obviously, sometimes we make these films for film festivals, and it would have been great for us to put it into a film festival, but we thought it best served the community, and this is why we make art. So we released Marathon, and we kept Black Bodies, and then TIFF accepted Black Bodies. And so that's the process of how we got, or how I got to Marathon and Black Bodies. Also, the two people in the films was Denisha and Comey, and they were both at the incident with me. And so the Black Bodies has spoken word in it. And so that was Comey's way of getting through the trauma. And we just turned to each other in art and tried to figure out how we can make it through this situation.
Wow. So I wanted to start with, I have a slew of questions. And I wanted to start with a very simple question. What is your favorite film? And what is your favorite scene in that film?
Yeah, Kelly, what's your favorite film?
I actually have a good answer for this because I just watched Concrete Cowboy yesterday. And it's amazing. And it is now my favorite film. I don't know if it's my favorite film of all time.
Okay.
Definitely in my top 5.
What was your favorite scene in that film?
There's a lot of scenes that I really loved. There was a really magical scene where, I don't want to ruin it, but one, Caleb, I think his last name is McLaughlin from Stranger Things. Mm-hmm. At one point, he learns to stand up on a horse, and the sun is setting, and the sky is like pink and really beautiful and purple and like golden, and then it's just a silhouette of him trying to stand on this horse, and it's just this moment of the trial and error, and it just felt very inspiring and so beautiful and touching, and yeah, it's now one of my favorite films. So I'm happy I watched it yesterday.
Tiffany?
I don't know. I can't, it's hard. If we're gonna do recent films, then we'll do like a festival recent, right? I think that maybe that's easier too. However, that's not true. There is a scene that it's like always like my go-to scene. I don't know if it's because I love to eat, I'm a big foodie, or this is a film that always inspired me to be able to tell stories that that are family driven, that are about East Asian families specifically. And it's like one of the opening scenes to Ang Lee's film Eat, Drink, Man, Woman, and the father is preparing a meal, and that it's just, I like the love of food, but understanding the nuance and how powerful making a meal and coming together means, and to see that process. And because it's so epic, and knowing, because it's like one of my favorite films, that opening scene always does it for me. Like it just gets me set and ready to experience it, but in a very visceral way. I also understand the meaning behind like the preparation of food, and sometimes things are too hard to be said but can be shared through a meal, and that can at least start the conversation sometimes. And sometimes you don't need to say anything, and it's just about food and nourishing each other. So that's always one of my favorite moments in that film, is that opening scene in Eat, Drink, Man, Woman. But for a festival, it's No Man Land. I watched that film, and the whole film is just gorgeous. And I think because I have a doc background, I'm just in love with the fact that she was able to use real people's stories that was based off of the book to be part of the process of making this film. I think there's something just so special and unique and incredible to be able to meld the two worlds together to tell the most authentic, best story. You take a star like Frances and you put her with these incredible humans that have lived such a life, and to tell that story makes the most sense. And my favorite scene in that film is when Swanky and her are in the trailer, and Chloe just uses the best of both worlds. She uses the reaction of Frances' face to really bring out the true story of what Swanky is sharing with her in that moment. And the camera angle is so unique. And I encourage everyone to watch what Chloe does. Swanky's talking to Frances like this, right? But the camera is here and she looks away, but when she's looking away, she's looking at us. And there's something around her, the angle and the position of it. It was just like, I felt like I was with them in a way that felt really whole. And then to cut to Frances's reaction, it was like, that's like my reaction. Like I looked like I felt like I looked like Frances. So that was, I think that was one of my favorite scenes in that film.
Talking about your favorite scenes and your favorite shot, my question is, what is your favorite shot, your go-to shot? And what does that shot say about your perspective on the world? What is your favorite shot? And what does that shot particularly say about your perspective in the world?
That's a great question. I think for me, I only know this from doing my website, that all of my films, I have a close-up of everyone's eyes in all of my films. And so I think that just talks about, like, I really do feel like the eyes are the window to your soul, and that's where your, like, everything lies. And I feel like the truth in the story is in the actor's eyes. And so that's something that I like to look at.
I think one of my favorite shots, or things to capture in documentary for me, is the space in between words. I think that is more telling than the words that are spoken sometimes. I think sometimes words are distracting. And I think for me, in every one of my films, I think it's always that pause. It's always like the thought. Thinking. And Sing Me a Lullaby, my mom does it a lot. I mean, if you ever meet my mom, she's like dramatic long pauses, but I'm not knocking my mom. I love my mom. It's something that I appreciate, is when you take that breath, or before the next words come out. It's not even the word that needs to be said. It's just the way that they look at you or away. The grandmothers in the apology, the same thing.
Yes.
You notice that a lot, is that it was always having the patience to just sit there and see what comes after, not to rush into something else, to move the camera somewhere else because you want to catch the action. It's actually when everything is still is when the magic comes out.
Yeah, with there was a scene in your film, The Apology. I think Grandma Elda
in the Philippines,
in the film, and there was this scene where she goes to the grave to talk to her husband Jeffrey, and it's like I knew Jeffrey. The way she was talking to this man who was dead, and was sort of telling this man that, hey, I'm going to reveal these things to our children that I have, hidden for I haven't told you. But there was a sense of playfulness. There was a sense of, there was this like forever eternal connection. And there was a moment where she's like, okay, so I gotta go because Tiffany and her friends, and I'm sitting, I'm like, he's not alive. Right? Like he's not alive. But that moment, it sort of shows you what type of relationship they had. And how did you even, because especially for her, she had a hard time verbalizing her feelings. So there was a moment where you were sitting on the bed, she was sitting on this side, and the camera was pointing to her, and she's just like that. And she couldn't say anything. And you can see her whole world is crumbling down, and you're just like, just say it, like just say it. And so for me, it was just like, how long did you take to get this woman to display that type of emotion on screen, because that's a lot. Like the
It's a lot.
apology.
It's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot. I mean, it's time. Time is everything, and the natural relationships that are built through time allow you to see them in that way as well. I think it's very different if you just meet someone and you point the camera, and even though they're very open to expressing, you might not know enough of them to know how to shoot, how to frame, and how to just exist. But with the apology, is just one of those unique experiences and privileges that I got, was to spend, the last few years with these women. And that allowed me to be able to get to know them and be their honorary granddaughter. And I had a lot of grandmothers in my life. And you need to have, like, in terms of when we talk about process, I think that if you are going to document, a character-driven story and really try to capture the emotions and the human condition, you can't rush that. You can't force it. I mean, yes, it would be nice not to take 10 years to make a film, or 15 years with Sing Me a Lullaby. But in hindsight, when I think back on it, I needed to take the time that I did to make all of these films, and I just read this interview I did with Pat for POV magazine, and he reminded me, it's just like everything that I've done has a theme, and they all kind of have this parallel and they feed into each other. And when I started Sing Me a Lullaby, it was 2005. I took a pause and I did the apology. And after I did the apology, I then was able to finish Sing Me a Lullaby. And those two films couldn't exist without the other. I needed to start one in order to begin the other. And then I needed to finish one before I could have the courage to know how to tell the other film, to finish the other film. So in that way, I've come to peace with trying to race against time, because it really does allow you to capture the human spirit in a way, in its authentic space.
And Kelly, I got familiar with your work from Heaven, and it's literally less than 5 minutes, but it's a punch. It's a punch in your face. And then I watched Marathon, and it was very vivid. It was very raw and vivid, and I had to pause every 5 seconds because I was like, I can't, I need a cheese pizza. I cannot do this. And so my question for you is, why do you tell the stories you tell in the way you tell them?
I think I tell the stories I tell in the way that they need to be told. They're kind of their own beast, and I just am here to be the messenger. With Haven, it started as like, what can I do with two people in a room as my first short? And so I just thought, what is something we don't see often? It's Black women getting their hair done, or Black children getting their hair done. And so I started there, and I said, when you're in a safe haven, which is why I called it Haven, what would you then speak to your mother about? What would be something you would like talk to your mom about? And when you feel safe. And then that's how that story started. And something I learned was that you don't have to have an ending. The ending can live with the audience. And so that's kind of something that I've carried along with most of my shorts, is that I want this impact and this ending to end with the audience and let them take it home and answer it themselves. And then it has a longer lasting impact. My work lives on through people's thoughts as they leave the theater or wherever they've watched it.
And so I wanted to go into a little bit about Canadian cinema and what's happening in Canadian cinema specifically. When I was asked to moderate this conversation, and your names were brought up, and it was the reason that your work displayed an authenticity in a way you present social issues on screen. And I thought that was fantastic, but I had a question in mind that I want to ask both of you, because I have seen social issues presented on screen with the Schindler's List, Amistad, the act of killing. If you look at Michael Moore's work, all those are also could be considered work that displays social, social political issues on screen. But my question to you too, why is the work that, people of color make considered not film, but film and activism? Why is your humanity and the stories in which you choose to tell considered a sense of activism or resistance when other artists is just a masterpiece?
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I don't know if it's completely true. I for sure know, like, I do name my things activism, because as a Black woman existing in this world, I'm an activist. I'm revolutionary just by existing. But my work is specific on what it talks about. Like Haven talks about children's sexual assault, and Marathon on Black Bodies specifically talks on police brutality and anti-Black racism. But I think my films going forward, maybe the message won't be as outright in my features, and maybe that won't look like work that work that is activism. And I also work with other people that make work that is not necessarily activism and could stand in that same light. And so, yeah, I don't know. I know that I call my work activism because it does change. It pushes for change, and it changes you once you've watched it.
I think that's such an interesting question. I'll tell you this, I had a lot of resistance in ever claiming myself as an activist. I had a really difficult time, actually, just because even getting to know the grandmothers, I got to know them as someone who just at the right place at the right time, being invited to go on this tour with these educators and then meeting them and then just being so angry. I was just so frustrated and angry that I had no idea that this happened, and that no one had taught me this. My parents didn't even know this, and that they were like 80, 90 years old and they were still fighting for this. And I was just like angry, right? And I guess why I had this resistance of positioning myself as an activist was that it already felt like it would box me in this way. And being a storyteller that, and having the themes that run in all my films, whether it's highly political or highly like it's a protest against, violence against women. I want to tell a human story first, because whether there's activism underlining in any of the things that I do, I think that for me, the most important thing is telling a powerful human story, because that's the way that we connect with each other. I think that for me, it could be really easy to be drowned out or be pigeonholed into something that people don't want to watch because they don't want to be lectured, or they want to avoid it because it's just like, it'll make them feel bad and like all the things that people decide to binge on Marvel films versus anything else. Like, it's just true. It's like, how do we capture the audiences, because there's a lot of content out there. How do we capture them to watch a film and be engulfed in the human story that they are connected with, that they can laugh and cry with, that they could feel relatable with, but in the end, know that there is a strong activist piece in there. There's a strong political message in there, without them feeling that they're being, put in this place of being necessarily lectured. And it's because I think maybe I do that. I say this because, like, for me, the films that I watch that have these political messages in them, that have these deep-rooted lessons that we should all draw from, I'm number one engulfed in the human connection that I have with the characters in the story. And the natural empathy comes, and my action to wanting to do something after I watch the film comes from a place of not guilt, but from heart, from relatableness, and like, I gotta do something. I gotta get up. I gotta do something. And those are the films that I like to like. Those are the films that affect me. And those are the films that I feel like I can tell and not feel like the pressure that I'm not a professional in this subject matter. I learned everything from like firsthand experience with the grandmothers, you know. I'm not a scholar. When people invite me to do these panels with a bunch of like professors and researchers, I'm like, I always open up and I always state my experience, you know, and it's with the grandmothers, it's with them, and my job, and I hope I can do them justice, is to share and tell their story in the most authentic way possible, so that everyone can hear it firsthand, versus through the statistics or archived footage, you know. So yeah, I don't know if that answered your question, but I thought that was a very interesting question, because often, like when I was thinking about the question also in the other way around, like, is the apology or film that, you know, really delves into sexual violence, and because it's, you know, East Asian women in the film, and because it deals with this, that it would then be, you know, pigeonholed as an activist film, which, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but I was thinking about your question around, like, is it because there's not a lot made about that subject matter? It's not heard, and so that they want to categorize it, you know, versus as just regarding it as a film with these messaging in it. I don't know. I want to think more about that question as well.
So while you think about that question, Kelly, I have a question for you. Can you afford to tell any other stories than the stories you tell? Can you afford it?
That's a really great question. I don't think it's in me, but I mean, I'm open. I always say that I'm the messenger, and the message isn't always mine. And so I'm open to whatever story comes to me, as long as it in one way makes the world a better place, and I can display humans in their best form, then I'm open to any story that comes.
What about you, Tiffany? Can you afford to tell stories that does, you know, that is about, you know, nothing? Like Seinfeld, can you just make a story about?
Even Seinfeld has their messaging.
I know, it's a story about nothing.
It's so funny.
It's a story about nothing. It's a story about nothing. So it's,
I feel, honestly, Seinfeld is, it's so, I mean, there's so many things, so many layered, like when you look back on Seinfeld now, you're like, you really look at the layers of some of it.
right.
But can I afford to? Yes, I mean, I am invested in telling the stories, and comedy, like, I think really good comedy is really hard to do. Like, just like really good horror film is really, like, these genre specific films, I think they're a challenge. I'm interested in it. I love what Jason Peele has done, you know, like, I think that anything that we can take genre and be able to still tell a powerful story. And I think that it is such a privilege to do what we do, be a storyteller. It's like ridiculous when I tell some family members, like when I go back home and I tell people, like, oh, what do you do for a living? It's a privilege to be able to be a storyteller, to share stories, and that's what you do for a living. So I don't know, I'm raised on a lot of Chinese guilt. And so the number one thing for me is, like, don't waste that opportunity when you have this platform. I don't want to say shit out. Sorry, I don't know if I could swear. I have a bad way of swearing all the time. But I do think that for me, doesn't matter what stories I tell, whether it will be a comedy, you know, whether it will be drama, or even one day maybe a Marvel superhero, whatever. I do believe that we can't waste any time, any opportunity to tell the most authentic story and to raise the voices that aren't heard. I do think that there is a way of always being able to do that with levity, you know, as a masterpiece. Like, I do, and it's exciting to me, you know, and when I see new films that come out that do have those layered messaging and is incredibly entertaining, it excites me. Like, I May Destroy You. What the hell? Did you guys see that? Like, I binged on it for 2 days and I couldn't, I was dreaming about her. but like it's so well written, you know, and it's so entertaining to watch. Yet I'm like, how did she do that? How did she take me to every layer possible and all the perspectives of what like sexual violence looks like and reporting? Like, it is just so incredible. That series is the proof that we can tell those stories, and we do not have to be pigeonholed as, you know, oh, activist filmmaker over there, and we know the type of movie she's going to make. You know, like, we can be great storytellers across the board that can reach the wide audience. And I think that that's the goal for me, is to be able to still tell the stories that I want to tell, that have the messaging that I believe that are important, and still reach a wide audience. There's no point in making a film if it's only going to stay within like this small little pocket. There really isn't, because we need to actually affect and impact the people who don't know, not the people who already know. They know, it's everybody else. And I do think I May Destroy You is a perfect example. I don't think some people know what they're about to watch when they watch it, but they're already invested and they're going to binge the crap out of it. I'm excited for stuff like that. That's why I'm still in this industry. And even though you get burnt out because of all of the crap that comes with this industry, when you see shows like that, it means that we have to keep going.
And on top of that, I read an article, and it's by Brian Johnson, and it was a fairly old article in the Canadian Ink, and so essentially the author is, first of all, the title is called Canadian or English Canadian Films and Why No One Sees Them. And so, since there's 3 directors that make predominantly English film, and one of the arguments in this article comes from the actor Paul Cross, and he says that people, or Canadians, particularly English Canadians, are making films that no one wants to watch. And he attributes it to our funding system and things of that nature. And we can get into that. But my question to you, I'm assuming this is a myth, but if it's not a myth, that no one is watching Canadian film, does that concern you as a director that makes Canadian English films?
That's another great question. And I honestly I don't watch Canadian films. But not specifically.
Oh, boy.
But like the specific films. Like, I wouldn't say that I don't watch Canadian films.
Yeah.
But like, I like films that go to festivals. But like the other films that like don't go to festivals and just come out and they're all like MOW type films, I don't watch those. I have to be completely honest, and that pushes me to be a better filmmaker every day. It pushes me to like not make those films. Like, whenever I'm in a production meeting, I'm like, great, we can't make it look like this. And it does have to do with the funding system. And if you're not getting enough money, how can you afford to buy lights? All the films look the same.
Yeah.
And we have to be honest, like the Canadian film industry isn't a huge industry.
Yeah.
And it's for that exact reason. All of the films look exactly the same, and they're all boring. They're all a coming of age story in the West. I've never, like, I'm an immigrant. I've never been out. Like, I've been to Ontario and I've been to Quebec, but those films don't interest me. As a Black woman who lives in Toronto, I don't want to watch coming of age stories of people in Alberta all the time. Like, it, and so I honestly agree with the article. Like, I think it's very correct, which is like why I push so hard.
I love it, Kelly. Yes. I mean,
when is the last time you guys have both watched a Canadian film outside of the film festival world?
Honestly, like the last time is probably when I had cable, because, you know, sometimes you like just turn it on and it's like Christmas season, like one of those.
An MOW.
Yeah. Sometimes people see it in gyms. Sometimes.
And technically those aren't even Canadian. They're made in Canada, but they're technically American, right? Yeah.
You find a way, but
Okay, I will say this. You're absolutely right. I think that, you know, being in the industry, like we watch our peers' films. We support our peers' films.
Yeah.
Some of them make it to festivals, some of them don't. For all the reasons and political reasons that festivals, like even how they program, it's not even because it's not good enough or not. It's like just thematic, whatever. So in that regard, I try to watch and support Canadian films in that way, and it's, yes, if they're not our peers and it's not, you know, something that's recommended, are we going to just like turn on the television and watch what's up, or go to a theater and see, you know, that movie? It's tends to always be, like a coming of age or a hockey movie, or like a sports hockey movie, like how they became a hockey player or something like that. I mean, everything that Kelly said, I agree. Yeah, of course. It's all true.
And also, Canadian films aren't promoted and aren't marketed in the same way. So if a really great independent film was made and it wasn't about a coming of age story in Alberta, we would never know. Like, it really, unless it hits festivals and it creates a buzz, we really would never know about the film. And so, like, outside of the festival world, it's a shame, but that's why, like, I push so hard to build the industry and like push my producers and have the production team that I have and do all the things that I do, because being an artist isn't sustainable in Canada.
Yeah.
And it needs to be, because it's ridiculous that this country is so huge with so many stories to tell. And it's a mosaic of all of immigrants from all over the world. And we're still telling stories about the coming of age story in Alberta, you know? And so, yeah, I don't watch those films, but I do think that it pushes me a lot to make different films and better films and step out of what all those films look like.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the problem with the whole funding thing is it's like, you are only going to, if you're not going to invest and you're going to take a big chunk of money and then like disperse it to a bunch of people. So now everyone has like a quarter of, you know, what a normal budgeted film that could actually get properly made, and not like mentally kill everybody and stress everybody out, and actually hire the people, like the amount of people needed in order to make it. It's frustrating to see, because it's like, for some funding agency, not naming any names, is just like, it's not about the quality, it's about the quantity. Look at how much we're able to do, but are you really championing those films? Because if you're championing, it's not about how many you do, it's about how much you can support and give them, and to allow them to truly rise. You know? And what does it look like when you split a cake to 50 people versus giving it to 5? Like, those 50 people are still going to be hungry, whereas you could have just, you know, like, or find more cake.
And they now have to pay their crew like $100 a day.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
You're literally paying for new people to learn on your film. Your film can't be any good.
No. And it's this endless cycle that just perpetuates something that, again, next generation filmmakers don't want to be part of this industry, because they see what the struggle is up against.
And so they just move to America, and then we just lose all of our talent. It's the cycle. It's the Canadian cycle.
Which we all consider doing, I'm sure, is to go down. If it wasn't for COVID, I'm sure we were all thinking about going down there.
This is my year now.
Is that something that you seriously thought about? Because I know we have great talent. We have the James Camerons of the Avatars. We got the Rachel McAdams. We have the Mike Myers. We got the Jim Carreys. We got all the Ryans. All of these people.
All of them live in the US.
To make films in America, and no one is making films here. But another question for you: in what way do you think? In what way is your film one Canadian? So so I'm going to use myself as an example. So I am new to this industry. So this is like a pep talk, okay? And oftentimes what happens is that when you present your story to whomever, either the producer or the funders, there is a requirement that it's Canadian, quote unquote. So, you know, coming of age film about a person in Alberta. And most of us are immigrants or have parents who are immigrants, and we have other places that we call home. So sometimes you have the desire to make films like The Apology or Sing Me a Lullaby. And when you present that idea, it's just like, but that's not Canadian. So what makes a film Canadian?
I mean, I straight up, like with The Apology, if it wasn't for like my producer, Anita Lee, who's at the National Film Board, she's the EP and the producer of our film. She's of Korean background. She championed that film so hard, and we were able to make it and at that, you know, what it is today. But what if it wasn't her? I don't think it would have been able to have had the success that it had, and to be able to be supported and backed and encouraged like that. And like you said, how is this a Canadian film? I mean, the fact that I was born and raised here, that, you know, everything about it should be Canadian. If you think about anything that we do, like the stories, even though it's not shot here, like everything that I've been educated, but also just really like the surroundings and the people that make up this country and this city and everything about like the richness of it are the stories that are also told from abroad as well, you know, and are integrated. And that's, for me, that's the way I would like to look at it like that, even though at times I find it really hard, because I often think that, you know, people do look at The Apology and they're like, how is this Canadian? Is it just because she was born there? You know, like they don't associate other things to it, and therefore there's like less love in Canada and more love from abroad. Like I do think that people see it in that way, but my definition is more around like the representation of all the people that live in this country versus what stereotypically people think of what Canada looks like.
Kelly, what makes your films and the subject matter Canadian, inherently Canadian?
I think my subject matters are universal, and so anybody can claim them. I mean, I haven't had to ask for funding for any of my shorts, so I haven't had to prove that they're Canadian, but they definitely, I mean, for my feature that I'm working on right now, we got funding, and it's an immigration story, which is the most Canadian story you can tell. And so, yeah, I mean, for me, all of my stories are universal. I guess I haven't had to prove that yet, which is an interesting thing. Yeah.
I found something on your Instagram and I thought that was really profound, and I wanted to share with everybody. You, under a poster for Black Bodies, you said this: on September 22nd, 2018, we filmed Black Bodies in a dusty warehouse overnight with the worst sound person and a weird chunky ice cream macaroni pie. My younger brother had to go back and forth trying to finish his school assignment, and there was a table with a hotspot as a production office. And for you, Tiffany, you DP'd most of your work, and that not only is to sort of create this sense of intimacy with your, you know, your subject matter, but it's also budgetary, I'm assuming. Especially if you're going to do a film that is 15 years, right? And so far, going back to the funding situation, there are any government organization would say, we're here for people of color, for women, LGBTQ, immigrants, we're here to support, we want female directors, we want 50-50, all of that. So all these great things are being said. In reality, that's not happening. Am I just reaching, or this is the actual, like, hey, there are people who are trying to make effort to change the industry, but we're not seeing the fruit of that? Am I reaching too far?
I mean, I would speak to, in terms of like the funding aspects, I think that more so than ever this year, people have to follow suit, and they will be called out very quickly if they don't. But for me, it's always been beyond that. It's beyond the funding. Like again, the talking about like even how you split the pot of money, you commit to it in the same way that you would commit to like someone well known that, you know, like give them that same pot of money, not just the like, here you go, you know, like you have, it has to be fully committed, fully backed in a for real way, and not just to tokenize and check out your like check boxes, right? That to me, I think is not only setting people up for failure, and setting people up to hate each other on set, because that's what will happen. You're going to ask for a lot of favors to get that work done, and it's not fair. And you're leaving a bad taste in everybody's mouth for the next experience. And if anything, you're going to kill a lot more filmmakers by doing that versus encouraging us to make another one, right? And so the funding for me, I see that people are taking up these initiatives, you know. I'm part of the DGC, both me and Kelly are. And I think that for me, what I'm excited about, especially now being elected for a second vice chair, like I want to be part of the change. Thank you. I want to be part of the change. I want to have a seat at the table to look over the policies, to really voice the concerns of, you know, emerging filmmakers, and to be able to really see the, like, how the beginning looks like for us, but also the end result for us. And because what happens here is that when policies are made, they're often looked at as a certain type of filmmakers, you know, a certain demographic that have X amount of experience. And so often unions or guilds can really just support that particular type of filmmaker, because the majority, whereas we need to start looking at all levels of filmmakers that are up and coming, that are coming out of school, you know, that, you know, our the BIPOC community as well. It's like, what it's different, where you can't be all put underneath the same umbrella and have policies just represent that. Like, so I do think taking seat at table is the way to also look and change things. And it's not just about changing the funding stream. I think it's also about like the mentality, even if you get a seat at the table in the executive room, it's like there needs to be a whole overhaul that starts from the very top, but also down to even our homes, in our community, in the school system, because there are young people there that are totally, completely discouraged to go into this film. And I don't blame them. Like, what do they have to prove that this is a good idea? Like, there's like, I can't even tell my nephews with a straight face that this would be a good idea to get into it, because fuck, it is hard. It is hard for all of us, but, and we are sticking to it because we want to be a success story that can prove to the next generation that it can be done. But can it not be as hard for the next, like, can we make it easier? You know, and I think it's like us documenting and having these discussions is fantastic. And knowing that, like, it's not just changing one thing and being a Band-Aid solution, it's about changing all levels of it. It's about implementing in all the steps to actually see change and actually see an encouragement of emerging filmmakers, specifically in the BIPOC community, to rise up.
Kelly?
I mean, Tiffany said it all. She really knows what she's talking about. Yeah, that's exactly what I would have said, to be honest. Like, it's about getting a seat at the table. It's also about changing the funding stream. It's about a complete overhaul of what we've been doing so far. Like, nothing has worked thus far. And so it really is about like real deep-rooted changes in this industry. We can't give 100 filmmakers $10,000 and expect anything good to come out of it. Like, we really just need to give a bunch of them $50K and then actually support them the way that they need to be supported. And so that's really where we're at. Like, you said before, Tiffany, it's the cake is being sliced too thinly, and we're giving it to people. And then when it doesn't succeed, we're like, see, we helped BIPOC people. I don't know what the problem is. Yeah, you set them up to fail. And so, yeah, that's really it. It's really just like, how are you really supporting filmmakers? Because giving them under budget is not supportive. You know, and that's why, like, in that same, if you had kept reading the same Instagram post that you had just read, you would see that we said no to our film. Like, my first feature was supposed to be called Summer of the Gun, and we wanted a lot of money for it because we knew that it's a huge story, and people of color deserve to be paid well for the work that we're doing. And we want to invest in the community that we're taking the stories from. And we couldn't do with the amount of money that they were giving us, so we had to say no. And everyone looked at us like we were crazy. Because how could you say no? This is like the path to becoming a Canadian filmmaker. We had to. And I mean, I just wrote a film that was less money, and we got the money back again for this film. But sometimes you really have to look at it and be like, that film, if I'd have said yes to it and gone ahead with it, first of all, COVID would have just trampled all of my dreams anyway, because we would have shot it this summer. So it would have really been terrible. But you have to really look at your vision and say, is it going to work? And most of the time, it's not going to work with the money that these funding bodies are giving us. And so it is really like deep-rooted change that needs to happen.
So I've been prompted to let everyone know that is watching this panel.
Yeah, there's other people watching us as well.
There are other people. There's not 3 people. It's not like the DGC and POV. There's other people. So guys, we've made it. Just to open up questions, if you have questions for Tiffany or Kelly, to just ask the questions. It's the Q&A button, and there's going to be people who are going to look through your questions and let me know. But I will continue with my questions. Tiffany, I wrote this down because in your film, The Bassinet, first of all, your mother and Victoria are my favorite people.
Okay, someone needs to record. Is this thing recorded?
Yes.
Okay. That's gonna save me later on.
In the way, Kelly had a really beautiful way of telling that story in like less than 5 minutes. You also had a really brilliant way of telling this really compelling, very deeply personal story, Bassinet, not the crib, Bassinet. And you said something really interesting in that really stuck to me, because I was like, I'm an African woman, so as soon as you said this quote, I was like, I feel like my mother is talking to me. But this is what you said, and it was in Chinese, and it translated, it said, for those who swallow bitterness are stronger than others. And I just sat there and I thought that was my mother, my grandmother, all the women in my life who keeps telling me, Sunita, if you this woman empowerment, my friend, we want grandchildren. This woman empowerment is too much. And so for me, when I heard that, I was like, but this idea of swallowing your own pain to save face is a requirement that women have been required to do for like years, particularly Black women. Me and Kelly can, chop on that. But in asking this question, this common question, what has been your favorite part about telling stories, particularly about women and women's pain, and not in a way of victimizing them? Like, you two have an interesting way of telling human story with so much pain in it. But there's no victimization. There's not like, oh my God, I feel so bad for Grandma Jill. I feel bad for that man running in the dark in the marathon trying to survive. Like, how have you been able to do that?
You are the best. I love your questions. I love your insight. I love the way you review and reflect. And it is, it's only recently that I realized that I have like this theme going on in the films I make, and what you picked up on it, and not wanting to victimize these women when it so easily can be done. And I think that's what has been done, and it doesn't do any good. It hasn't done any good decades before, victimizing women in these roles to stereotype them, because if anything, over, I guess, my years of life, I bared witness to some of the strongest people that I've ever seen, and their strength is the resilience of being able to also swallow the bitter. It is true. There's a strength that culturally I think is what's messed up. Is that I'm born and raised here, but who's to say what is right or wrong? Because there is an element of strength that in the apology, I guess, in every one of my films, in the apology and Sing Me a Lullaby and The Bassinet, it is these lessons from our elders, these women that have swallowed it, swallowed the pain, put the pain on their shoulders and carried on and gave us life, gave me life. I'm here today because grandmothers had swallowed the bitter. My mother swallowed the bitter. Like I am here today because of that.
Yeah.
And I cannot separate from it. And I can't say what you did was wrong, because in North America, we're not trained to look at it or see those types of things. And so to acknowledge it and to tell it in all the dimensions and all the complexities is always something that I will embrace, and what I love about my culture and what I'm frustrated about it. Like, I will always do that, because that is the better way to celebrate us, to understand us, and to praise that suffering as well, to understand where that was rooted from, and not to pigeonhole again to victimize, because that literally goes nowhere. And yeah, and I thank you for that question, because it's something that means a lot to me in everything that I do, and all the women that I get to meet. I am stronger because of them. I am stronger because I get to see those aspects of it, and I get to see my strength through that. Otherwise, I could look at myself as weak and not strong enough to carry a story, you know? Like, we need to learn the lessons of the women that have come before us.
Kelly?
Yeah, I think for me, like I try and show how multifaceted the humans are. And so sometimes if you're victimization, but you're a victim, but you're also very powerful, it doesn't come across as like victimization. And so that's really what it is. Like, the power always outshines everything else that's going on. Black people of color are so powerful that it will always outshine all of the other things that are going on in the world. And so that's the type of energy that I like to show with my characters. So I think that, like, there's moments where they'll seem like they're victims, but everything else will, like, their joy, their happiness, their power will always outshine everything.
So we have our first question, and it's from Jennifer Volk. I'm hoping I pronounced that right. I am like a big person when it comes to pronouncing names, because mine is very difficult, but like, I want to make sure I pronounce everybody's names correctly. So this question says, what response have you seen from the Canadian public to any of your advocacy you have done, especially since we are a country that isn't grounded in uprising movements? We are polite citizen. Let's start with Kelly. I know 2020. 2020 was a very interesting year for all of us.
These questions have all been stumping questions. I'm like, these are very deep questions.
We want to, we want to get to know you, your work, and why you chose to get into this industry that is nuts. So we're asking you these questions.
So what is the response that you have seen from Canadian public about any advocacy you've done? It's interesting. I mean, also, like, the themes of my films, because of what they speak on, I get a lot of I'm gonna wait for this fire truck to pass. I get a lot of feedback from both the US and from Canada. I think for me, like, a lot of feedback that I do get from my films is a lot of Black folks and POC folks say they use my films to talk for them. And so when there's conversations that are happening that they can't speak on, they will send my film. And so I'm very happy about that my film is actually being the voice for the voiceless. I haven't really gotten like negative feedback. I really, I haven't I've gotten some stupid DMs like, why didn't you make films about me? And I got one of those this morning. I don't know who you are. But yeah, so, but for real, like, most of the answers are, most of the feedback is really welcoming, and it's just like, thank you for doing this. I don't know how, I mean, through Marathon and Black Bodies, we did start an advocacy art collective called We Have the Right to Be Right. And very clear, it's about having the right to be right. And it was an art collective where we all used our art for advocacy. One of the campaigns we did after the experience that we had in the rental property was speaking about accusers' accountability, that people that do call 911 should be charged. It should be there should be a criminal offense. And so that's something that we pushed and we toured with and we spoke to people about, and something we were pushing or are pushing during this racial uprising, and having conversations about how can we make that something that is like, it's a law, so that if you do call 911 and we can prove that it's racially biased, what then happens to you?
Mm-hmm.
Because the call of the one for us in California, and it was a $10,000 call. Flying out a helicopter costs you 10 grand. And so who pays for that? I don't live there. And do all the taxpayers have to pay for that? That should be a bill that's given to that lady. And so that kind of advocacy is what we're pushing with the film. And we've had really great feedback and really great support, and people just really being on our side and helping us and navigating us to the way to we can make accusers accountability something that really sticks, and it's something that we can stop the generation of Karens and all of the crazy things that are going on in this world. But yeah, just really make the change sustainable, really.
I think even speaking to, a country that is not grounded in uprising, I think oftentimes we assume the conflict between, African Americans or Black Americans and the government of United States to be similar to us here. But I think during, the settlement period, there were a lot of uprising, particularly from our First Nations and Indigenous communities. They're not going to be like, oh, come take our land. That was not what was happening. Like, no. So there's no way, with this question, I just think that although we're a polite people and we don't want to disturb the peace, I think there's going to be a point in time, and they have been a point in time where people are going to rebel. Like Louis Riel was executed for treason because he was like, I know you're not going to treat me, and you're not going to treat people who look like me at any point anyhow, right? So it's just, I think sometimes just kind of going back to history and kind of looking at the history of our country. I mean, yes, there is a myth that this is a safe haven, but you have to look at the colonial time. Then during the colonial time, there was slavery. Black people were enslaved in this country. Then you had the Japanese in concentration camp. You had the Chinese tax head. You had the Indian Act. Like, there just been a plethora of injustice in this country.
Yeah, and I think also, like, the politeness. I always say, like, the PR person for Canada is really great. Like, the branding is amazing in Canada, that we're polite. I think the people that are polite are the people that are ignorant, to be honest. Like, the people that are polite are the people that have blinders on and don't think racism exists. And that's great that you live in that world, but it's not real. And racism does exist here. It's harder for Indigenous folks. It's harder for Black folks, we can't, because we're comparing it to America, it's not as bad. You don't get shot. You do. DeAndre Campbell called the police on himself because he was having a mental health crisis, and the police came into his house and shot him in his house with his family there. And so we have to look at these things and say, oh, and we can't just sweep it under the rug. Everyone has forgotten about him. He's buried now, and we've all moved on. The hashtag has faded away, and so I think the politeness is just a brand, and just move away from it and really speak to the issues that are happening here, and not compare ourselves to the countries that are falling apart.
And with that, I know we're almost coming to an end. So I have a couple questions. And for those who have more questions, please submit your questions. We're just going to go until 5:30. This conversation is incredible. You guys are very incredible. It took like 15 questions for your personality to show up, but we're happy.
No, it was, what the truth is, I forgot there was actually like all these people watching, and I was like, oh, we're just having this conversation. I'm like drinking out of 3 different mugs. I'm falling off my seat. Feels like we're just catching up.
And so I want to go back to like the basic, the simple, like what made you become a director? What made you come into this industry? Like, why would you even want to come to this industry?
It's so foolish.
It was a terrible mistake, and I want to go back.
Yeah.
For me, I was a child actor. And then I moved to theater, and then I moved to theater production, and then I moved to TV production, and then I went to school, and then I graduated, and then it was a recession, and then everything they taught us was analog, and it turned into digital, and so everything I had learned in school was a waste of my time. And then I'm like, I need a job, so then I just started doing music videos, which led to short films, and here I am.
Wow.
So it was just a series of steps that led me here. I've always known that I wanted to do this in some fashion. I always knew that I wanted to be in the entertainment field. My family is largely based in the entertainment field, so that's how I was raised. And being a child actor, like this is something, it's very comfortable for me. And so there's never been a time where I'm like, oh my God, this is what I want to do. But there's always been times where I know that I'm like, I couldn't do anything else. As crazy as this is, there's literally no other job that I can think of that I would do.
It's so funny, Kelly. Me and my sister wanted to be children actors, and my mom worked out like $3,000 to get us like acting classes when we were like 6, 7. And it's like so like bizarre that, you know, a Chinese mother would do that, but we like begged her. I think we like saw a Barney show and we're like, we want to be on that show. They scammed her, and then we were never able to act ever again. Yeah. Yeah, Global Talent. There's like a whole story about how like
I remember that.
you remember that? They like stole dreams of little children.
Yeah.
And by the 3rd month, when you're supposed to do the show and tell, they like booted out of like Square One office and like did this all across Canada.
Yeah.
So they spoiled our dreams, and because we
I'm still casting children actors, and they're like, their parents are very weary because of that exact thing.
Yeah.
Like that thing has stuck to the Canadian industry for so long.
Global Talents, man. $3,000 back then. It's still a lot of money, but like back then it was like my mom saved up for that, and she was like, no, never again. But for me, it was like I grew up like most people who like have 2 working parents, and then eventually just, you know, my mom just raising us. So really, you know, television, film, like 50% of that like raised me, you know? And so I guess because I got lost into those types of realities, I saw the power in which what it did to me, and allowed me to dream and escape. And I knew that that was the world that I wanted to be part of painting, because I also was just waiting for films that looked like that had some representation of me. Like it was weird, you know, adopting into other people's cultures while growing up. You know, you start forgetting what you look like. Like I was raised on Full House and Married with Children, and, you know, like all the shows that like none of the themes, nothing, like, but it was all I had. Like I wish I had, you know, a form of Fresh Off the Boat or Kim's Convenience. You know, I wish I had just something that made me not feel like I didn't belong, like I wasn't right, like I was broken, or I wasn't like normal. Like when you're young, you don't think about representation. You just think like, oh, I'm lesser of, and that's why I don't see myself. And I think up to a certain point, understanding the power of that, of what it does to your psyche, what it did to mine, instead of waiting for it, I was just like, fuck it, I need to be part of it. And even though it's so obscure to be into film, my family's not in the film industry or anything like that, but they appreciate the arts. And I think that allowed me to be able to convince them that I was gonna, it was either military school, it was film school, like literally it was one or the other. I was not like the most disciplined kid in high school, but I think that was a driving force for me, and was to go into film school and to learn more of the craft. And I just kept on going. Like I was one of 5 or one of 6, you know, person of color in my film program at Ryerson, and the rest were all white. So that just shows you like who's studying it, who's going forward. Like you see it. And I've noticed like that was in 2007, and every other year since me, I've asked like students like what the demographic is. It's like not that much different, you know? And so you do see who are, you know, being supported and going into this field. And even in film school, you're also fighting for your voice to be heard, and not for other, like calling out other people or stereotyping other people in their scripts, because they all come from different parts of Canada, and everyone, you know, and you see it and you see why, and you understand the machine. It all gets started right there, you know? And so I was very angry for the first 2 years, but then I also realized, again, it's like, if you don't take your seat, you know, can't complain. Like, I can complain. If I don't take my seat, if I don't keep at it, I can't complain. This is why I'm still in it.
Yeah. I have one more question before we wrap up, and I think the answers will take us to the 5:30. So in your film, Sing Me a Lullaby, and this question is going to be for Kelly, and then we're going to go to Tiffany. Tiffany, you said something interesting at the end where you're in the motorcycle, or it's a thing. You're driving on the road. And you're taking photos with your mom, and you said, I came to Taiwan to find my grandmother. Instead, I found my mother. And I thought that was a very interesting statement. And so my question is to Kelly, with that sort of context, in Heaven, the Marathon, and Black Bodies, what did you find? What part of yourself did you find making these films? And the same question to Tiffany.
Where do you get these? How?
Like, what?
It's not even fair. You definitely should have emailed these to us beforehand.
Yeah,
This is gonna take us until 5. You asked me how I find myself.
great.
And I gotta leave time for Tiffany to talk.
Where can
We
I
have 2 minutes.
To tell you how I found myself. How did I find myself in 2 minutes? I don't know. Like, the more that I make films, the more that I grow. Like, I grow with all of my films. As soon as I've made the film, I can't deal with the
just done?
Yeah, as soon as I make my films, like, as soon as my films are done, I've already outgrown them. So, like, once I tour with the film and I screen them, I'm already over it a little bit. Like, I can't watch my films again. I like to watch what the audience is doing, but I don't like to watch them again.
Yeah.
And so my films push me to grow as a human. Like, they really do push me, but how they push me to grow, I don't know. I just know I become better with every film in different ways. That's what I could speak to you for 30 minutes about it personally, but I don't know. Yeah, in the next 1 minute I have. Yeah, I just know that I'm a different person every time I've edited a film, and I watch it and go, like, that was kind of like a capsule that nobody will see of myself. Only I will see it when I watch it, of what my thought process was and who I was and what I knew at that time. But I pride myself on growing. Like, I love growing, and I love getting closer to the person I'm supposed to be. And I'm proud of that. And I hope that answers the question, because my 2 minutes are up.
Okay.
Tiffany, your turn.
This is my answer. Wow. Yeah, it's such a, I feel like we should have had a drink for this. And
Yeah. I definitely was drinking, but yeah.
Oh, is that what you had? I was kind of like, is that
Yeah, it's a
bubble tea?
mimosa. It's a mimosa.
I thought it was bubble
It's like,
tea. Oh no, there's are blueberries in there.
ooh.
Oh, I'm so jealous. I should
My
have had.
friend made it for me, so.
I have goji berries, like Chinese herbal tea. Yeah. Oh, I should have added something to that. The question is so complicated, and I don't even know how to, I really don't know how to approach it, because the growth. Who am I today? Honestly, when I made Sing Me a Lullaby, and after finishing it and finishing the apology and finishing the bassinet, I'm not sure if you guys heard, like, every 7 years, we apparently are like a whole different person, because our cells completely regenerate and we're like this new person. So I've had 2 cycles of birth in many ways while making Sing Me a Lullaby. And because I'm able to see the transformation, I see it in the way that I work with people. I see it the way that the stories I want to tell. I see it in my vulnerability and what I'm ready to share. And because of that, I am definitely changing in those aspects. And I notice that. And like Kelly says, it's like, I appreciate the growth. I am definitely a different person, but I want to believe want to believe, even though we regenerate every 7 years, I want to believe that 21-year-old Tiffany, the one that had all this confidence and spunk and this will to take risks like that, I want to know that she's still there somewhere in me, because I think that we can't lose sight in some of the intentions that we started off in this business, because I think we should love it. I think we should love making films and telling stories and not looking at like this deep responsibility that makes us like cringe at night. You know, I want to always grow, but grow with my younger self with me. And I want to do that in the future, also thinking about my grandmothers are always leading me. So I want to take both of their hands and continue this path forward and embrace every minute of it, because the pandemic has taught me, and all of us, I think, like the value of love and family and health, and that's what matters at the end of the day. And yeah, I don't even know if I even answered questions, because I couldn't answer it. It's just too hard.
It's great, like maintaining, you want to grow but maintain your essence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then have your ancestors guide. Like it's just,
yeah.
That was a great.
We understand.
Tiffany should have gone first.
But with that, that's our time. I really do want to thank both of you, Tiffany and Kelly. I want to thank the Directors Guild of Canada and POV 3rd Street. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and we hope to see you soon. Please keep safe. It's still a global pandemic. Please, please, please do your best to keep yourself safe and other people as well. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next month, I believe.
Thank you for being the best host ever and for
seriously, you are the best.
Yeah, I'm happy this is recorded. I'm gonna go back and make Instagram posts with the real answers.
Yeah.
about how I've changed. Watch out for the new Instagram post, because it's coming. I got to think on it, but it'll come.
Oh my God, me too. Oh man, I had to think about it.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. You're the best.
Bye. I think they're one to us to go now.
Goodbye, everybody. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in.
Thank you. Bye.